Okay, let me stop share. Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our fifth Med Mentors Monday panel of 2021. Tonight's session is titled, Am I Ready to Apply? And we'll be hearing from a wonderful panel of all first-year med students at DGSOM. We just had a midterm a few hours ago, so I'm very grateful for all my classmates for being here tonight. I'd like to start off by having everyone just quickly introduce themselves. I can go first. So my name is Martina. I'm from Miami, Florida. I went to undergrad out there, and I took one gap year before applying to medical school.
Thank you, Martina. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly. I went to UCLA for undergrad. I was a community college transfer student and will be happy to provide any insights on how to apply to medical schools as a transfer student.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm from New York, New York, so I'm a long way from home. I went to Yale for undergrad, but I did that almost 5 years ago now. So I can definitely talk about taking a lot of gap years before you come to medical school. So that's what I did.
Hi everyone, my name is Keely. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and I also went to undergrad there at the University of Arizona. I graduated last May, so I went straight through to medical school. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask me.
Hi everyone, my name is Ava. Hometown of the San Fernando Valley, and I also went to UCLA for undergrad and graduated in 2019. So I took one gap year before coming here.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam. I'm originally from New Jersey. I went to school at Rutgers out in New Jersey. Like Emma, I took a few years between undergraduate and medical school. So I'm happy to answer any questions regarding sort of non-traditional.
I guess I should introduce myself too. My name is Nguyen. I am a UCLA alumnus, like many of my peers here. Yeah, I'll be mostly answering Q&A, but I don't know if I will be useful, but we'll see. So fire away.
Your answers are always useful and fun. Okay, so we got a lot of really great questions for today's session. This is definitely a huge topic, and many of the questions that we'll be asking tonight could actually be events, like panels all on their own. So we're going to try to cover as many topics as we can today, but next week we'll be talking about the actual application process. So if you're thinking of applying and you need help with thinking about, like what to write, definitely tune in next week as well. Okay, and with that, I think we can get started with questions. So our first question, how did you feel while you were preparing your application? Is it normal to have doubts as you're writing and feeling like you're not ready?
I can take that one. I took a really long time to decide when I was going to go. So I really had a lot of moments of doubt kind of over the years. I didn't take my MCAT until I was years out of undergrad. So I think my doubt stuff all happened then as I was studying for my MCAT. And I actually did like a whole round of studying for the MCAT where I was trying my best to stay motivated for it and to go for it. And ultimately I ended up not taking it because I just couldn't find the motivation to do it. And I think that ultimately ended up being the clue for me that I was ready to apply, because it's a lot of work. It's never going to be like a great time, no matter when you're doing it. Even if you really want to do it, it's never fun. So for me, knowing that I went through this MCAT process to try and study for it, and I just completely lacked the motivation to get it done when I'm usually like very driven when it comes to academics, as one tends to be when you're going into medicine. The next time around when I tried to study for it, I didn't have that same type of pause. So seeing the motivation in myself was when I knew that I was ready But for me, it took a really long time, and that's okay. I don't think that people talk about that enough. I think a lot of people take time off now, but 1 or 2 years is pretty typical, and anything longer than that is more unusual. But not, I mean, there's two of us right here who took longer than just the 2 years. So it's totally doable. And if you're having doubts and you're not ready to apply, just wait. Take some time, explore the world, like do things other than school, become a fully well-rounded person, and see if that's what you need to do. And that's totally fine to do that. So that's kind of the perspective that I come from.
I can speak a little bit about my experience as well. The application process is overwhelming, to say the least. There are many pieces that you have to worry about and put together. And I definitely have doubts whether I was ready or not. I applied my fourth year in undergrad, but I only had 2 years of like university experience and 2 years of pre-med experience as well, because I only decided that I would be pre-med after I transferred from community college. So I felt like I didn't have as many things as people who might have gone to a 4-year university and had been pre-med since day one. So that's always kind of on the back of my mind. I also had doubts about whether my my pre-med classes will be looked down upon because they're all from community college. And there's always like toxic forums online that say that you're not supposed to have any classes from community college or else you're not going to get into any medical school, which just to put it out there, it's not true. Especially if you're a transfer student, you're not just taking classes at community college in order to not take classes at your university, if that makes sense. Yeah, so those are kind of like the doubts that I've had throughout the entire process. But I think you're not alone. It's normal to go through that process, but just keep doing your best to put together all the pieces and yeah, believe in yourself.
I guess I can chime in a little bit as well. I mean, I typically respond Q&A, but I think I took 3 years, so a little bit more than a typical 2. And I felt for me, like I was debating for, I think at that point was about 3 years already between whether or not I wanted to apply to med school, because I was thinking of doing research as well. And I think at a certain time, I just felt like no matter what else I tried, like it's not going to make a difference because you have spent so much effort in putting into your like schoolwork, doing extracurricular activities. And if you just think about like, do I need this one extra thing just because someone else is out there trying to beat me? I think you're just going to put yourself into a hole really quickly. And I think for me, like it just came to a point that I don't think an extra year is going to make a difference for me in terms of research. And I was proud of what I have as a pre-med, and I just went for it because at a certain point, just be like, screw it, I'm doing it. So yeah, so that's just my experience.
Yeah. So some of our panelists have already touched on this question, but how far in advance did you decide to apply last cycle? Did you know for a while that you were going to apply this past year, or did you decide just immediately the year prior?
I think for myself, I knew prior to undergrad that I wanted to go to medical school. And so I came into undergrad kind of with a plan, knowing that I was going to apply during my senior year. And I started really early on in my freshman year, kind of planning this out and planning my class schedule. And I intentionally planned for my senior year to be kind of a light load in terms of my class schedule so that I would have the extra flexibility and time to go on interviews if like I was fortunate enough to get them. And so for me, I think what really like led to me being able to go through to medical school from undergrad was just a lot of planning on my part and making sure that I was searching for the opportunities, asking people who had gone straight through what their experiences were and learning from them, and just talking to people and just kind of making it happen, and also relying on my mentors and my professors to support me and to give me advice and just help me through the process.
Really similar to Keely, I knew I wanted to go to med school before starting undergrad. So it was always in the back of my mind. I had originally planned to go straight, but by the end of my second year, I knew I wasn't ready to take the MCAT or go straight in. So I knew that I would have to push it another year, and that was totally okay with me. So then I kind of planned the rest of my application around taking my MCAT after my junior year, and then preparing my application my senior year.
I also just want to jump in and say that I also knew that I wanted to be a doctor since I was a teenager, but I still had doubts, and I still took 4 years, and I'm still here, and that's okay. In fact, it's normal, very, very normal to have doubts. It's a big commitment. I'm sure even people who go straight through, I'm sure Keely had her doubts throughout too. It's a big commitment. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. You should take time to think for yourself. Do you want to do this? And having doubts is a part of that. And that's how you make sure you don't burn out once you're there, because you really want to be there. So take time to do that introspection. And sometimes that introspection can just happen during school, and sometimes you need time to take. Either way works, as long as you make sure that you really check in with yourself.
Kind of going off of what Emma just said, I think a lot of people worry about how many gap years they're going to take. I like to call them years of opportunity, because I think, you're still developing and you're still, forming your path to medical school. So I don't really call them gap years, but a lot of people worry about should I go straight through? How many gap years, how many years of opportunity should I take? And really, it just depends on every individual. There's not a right answer. For me, it was right to go straight through. And for somebody like Emma, it was right for her to have several years of opportunity, but we're both here and we both had our own unique experiences, and, we're here because of that. So there's no one right way to do it. I will say a lot of people, especially in my undergrad, as a freshman, everyone in my degree program, their dream was to go straight through to medical school, and everyone just started saying I'm going to go to medical school right after I graduate from undergrad. And in the end, that ended up changing quite a lot. And I think people sometimes come into undergrad thinking that I have to go straight through to medical school, and that's not the case at all. If I'm being honest, I think people who go straight through are actually in the minority, the class of medical school, people in medical school. So just have that introspection, think about what's right for you, and take the time that you need if you need it.
Yeah. Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I just wanted to add that I remember in undergrad, I was always so envious of people who are going straight to medical school. They must have superpowers that, got them to where they are and to go straight through. But it's only in med school that I realized that I'm now envious of people who had so much more life experience than me, who has a family and who have businesses and cool hobbies, and those. I'm very jealous of people who have all these things going on, and they're kind of the celebrities in our class too. Always have the best stories. So definitely don't feel pressured to go straight through. Like Keely says, I think it's quite the minority now. For me, I didn't know I was going to be pre-med until my third year in college. So I didn't plan in advance. And I kind of just explored around, spent some time in the clinic, and listen to podcasts and read books about like medical stuff until I thought that this career would be very fulfilling for me. And then judging the other like logistical stuff, when I thought that those things are in place, I thought I was ready to apply. And that just happened to be towards the end of my fourth year, my last year in university.
Great. So for those of you who did take a gap year, what did you do in your gap year or gap years or years of opportunity, as Keely likes to say?
So after I graduated, I actually thought I was going to go into education. So I graduated in 2014, and then I went to France to teach English for a year. Decided based on a few factors that wasn't for me. Came back and I went into business for a while. I worked for a few startups. And I thought that was interesting, but I wanted something a bit more stable. And so I happened to be in Boston, and it was pretty easy to sort of transition horizontally into one of the hospital systems there. And the rest of the time between then and now was honestly, taking classes first of all. And then I was honestly challenging myself, like, could I see myself in X, Y, or Z role in a hospital? I hadn't done any of the sort of introspection and self-conversation that's involved in terms of asking yourself, okay, if you do see yourself in a role in healthcare, do you want to be any of these like PA, NP roles, or do you want to go for MD? Like I was really new to the conversation later on in life. And so I was just like taking the time to ask myself, like, what does it look like in terms of your day-to-day schedule to be in any of these roles, and seeing if I could see myself in those roles, just talking these things out with people, right? I think there was a question earlier about doubt. And I think it's really important to not have that conversation exclusively with yourself in your head, because you're always going to have the same answers and questions. It's really important to talk to people outside of yourself and outside of your head, just to see like what answers they give. Talk to your family members, because they're going to sort of come along with you for the ride through medical school, whether they sort of like it or not. And just like have this active dialogue with people outside of yourself, and see what comes of it.
I just put this in the chat, but I worked in the Center for Healthcare Innovation and Delivery Science at NYU, which does sort of like health services research. It's kind of like quality improvement of care, but like in a robust research format. And I worked there for all 4 years. I'm really passionate about care delivery and improving care delivery, because we really need to do that in this country. And so not to get political, but I'm really passionate about it. So that's what I did. And I absolutely loved it. I loved taking my time off. It was incredible. Huge proponent of the years of opportunity. Keely knows this. I've talked to her about it a ton. But yeah, I love years of opportunity. So if anybody is thinking about taking a gap year, like, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to talk to you about it and tell you why I think it's a good idea.
I initially did the Summer Urban Health Fellowship with Harbor UCLA. So that was like for about, I think, a month or two right after I graduated. And then I started working at the Venice Family Clinic as an EMR trainer. And it was just such a wonderful experience working at a federally qualified health center and learning what that involves. And then I had been planning to travel after, but then COVID hit. So I highly, highly recommend, if y'all are able to travel, to do it, because it's the best time, because now our breaks are like 2 days long. So you will need to take a vacation.
Yeah, I worked in the lab that I was in undergrad to wrap up a project. And I also tutored high school kids, since I really enjoy teaching as well. I think, I also plan on traveling, but of course that was also not possible. But I think other than that, I think just having that experience of having like a 9 to 5 job, to know what to do with your time, to know what to do with your money. I think those things are like experience that I wouldn't have gotten if I had gone straight through. And I'm very glad that I took the time to learn these life skills, so that after med school I can sustain myself and be an adult.
So for those of you who were doing other things before applying to med school, like aside from undergrad, what was it like applying and interviewing, while you had all these other commitments? And then for Keely, what was it like for you applying while you were, still in undergrad? Do you think things would have been different if you were, if you had taken a gap or an opportunity year to do something else?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging interviewing during my senior year. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit stressful. Yeah, like I mentioned before, I kind of planned it early on, whereas so my class schedule would be a little bit lighter my senior year, so I was able to miss class a little bit more frequently. And I also spoke to my professors and just let them know. Once I told them that I was interviewing for medical school, all of them were really understanding, thankfully. And I was able to make up any work I missed and things like that. I think if I hadn't kind of worked ahead and planned ahead like that, it could have been a lot more challenging for me. I did it so I didn't have in-person labs my senior year, so I didn't have like these like giant chunks of time where I had to be on campus. I was mainly doing like lectures and just kind of missing those, and those were recorded anyway, so just like they are in med school, which you guys will learn to love when you get there. But yeah, so I think what really benefited me was just having a plan and kind of sticking to it, and it was stressful still, but it was doable.
I feel like people talk about this a lot with the difficulty of applying to school or studying for the MCAT while you have a full-time job. Being a student is the hardest job I have ever worked. Like anybody who says that it's easier or it's harder to apply when you have a full-time job, that's crazy to me. I mean, like, that being a student, the work never stops. Like it's always there. You've always got homework hanging over your head. You've always got something. I mean, we all know, like we just had a midterm today and we've got class tomorrow and a final in 2 weeks. Like it's not over. It's hard work. So I think that, there is a little bit more of like a work-life balance when you have a job, and some jobs are really hard and you're working many, many hours. And some of those are really difficult. It wasn't so bad for me because I had been working at my job for almost 4 years. So I had worked up sort of some chips that I could play, I guess, to get like additional time. But, having a salary when you're having to apply to medical school, which is a big monetary investment, is really helpful. So I think there's a lot of ways actually that having a full-time job is easier than being a student. And I think it gets the opposite. But like biggest props to the students who apply, because I think that is so much harder. And it just really impressed me every time I met someone who was interviewing and then had literally like a test the next day. So yeah, I think it's hard no matter what, but it's doable if you have a job, and clearly like it's doable when you have school too. But I think props are due to the students who apply.
Yeah, I have similar sentiments. My job was pretty flexible, and because I have the existing relationship with my PI, they were super chill about just letting me do my thing when I need to. Yeah, so really admire the students who are able to balance school and do all the interviews at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I remember meeting some other students in the interview trail who would like finish the interviews and then go back to like the hotel room or something to do an assignment that was due that night. So I always thought that was kind of rough. But yeah, but I mean, maybe if Keely was saying, like if you plan it ahead of time, then maybe you can be strategic with which classes you save for that semester that you're interviewing. So I think it depends for everyone. Okay. So how important is it to apply early? At what point in the cycle is it too late, and should I just wait for next year?
I think applying early is important. I can't give you like a time frame, but maybe I would say so. The ideal situation for those who aren't familiar with the application, we have a primary application and the secondary application. And primary application is just one app, and it will be sent to all the schools, but MCAS will not release it to the school until a certain date. And I think that's June 28th or something. And what happens is that they need to verify all the grades that you put into your application with your actual transcripts. And that takes time. And that takes a longer time the kind of deeper you go into the application cycle, since more people's applications are there for them to review. So if you want to be on the first wave of applications to be sent to each of the med school, people say within the first week of June is a good time. I wouldn't not apply if you miss that, or if you don't have your apps ready until like, let's say July. Just because if you're truly ready, I don't think that will like affect your odds too much. But the saying is that because all med schools are admitting rolling basis, the earlier you apply, the more spots are still available for them to admit you. But I can't give you like maybe I'm curious what the other panelists thinks. Like if someone has their application ready by like mid-July or even August, do you think that's too late?
Are you saying for the primary being ready? Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question to answer because there's always people who get into amazing schools and they applied in like August. But I think to be safe, it's such an expensive process. It's such a mentally draining process that I would suggest try to apply as early as possible because like Holly said, it is a rolling basis process. So I think for me personally, my latest goal time was end of June. So I did the first, second week, or I applied like the first or second week of when the application opened, but I think the latest would be end of June for me.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. The sooner the better, I think, is a shared sentiment. I hope that's somewhat helpful. So we can move into the assessing your application part of the session now. So what are some of the most important experiences that you were able to share in your app? In other words, what experiences were you asked the most about during your interviews? What are some things that you think are key to a really good app?
I feel like each interview is so different. Some interviews don't ask anything personal at all. You just go through stations called MMIs and just kind of, yeah, it's not as personal. Some, I don't know, like they don't talk about anything that are on my application, nor anything about my story, my life. I remember, I think one of my interviews at UCLA, like the doctor and I just talked about like physician burnout, and like empathy fatigue, like and like nothing about me, but it was just like a conversation. And I think maybe my application sucked, but I didn't get asked a lot about like the specific experiences that I had, but more so about like my story, my family, and yeah, that type of stuff. And of course, you'll have to answer. Most schools ask you about yourself, and then also ask you about why you want to go into medicine.
I feel like it's so person dependent. Like I'm seeing some questions in the Q&A about what things are the best to have, like what experiences are the best to have on your application. And so like, you know, I can tell you that the thing that they asked me the most about was my research, but I can also tell you that I worked at my lab for 4 years. And so it was a huge part of my application. Like I was at my lab in the end longer than I was at my undergrad. So they asked me about it because it was a huge part of me and it was a huge part of my personal statement. And whereas if volunteer work had been a huge part of my application, then that is what they would have asked about. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong. It's about what you're passionate about. You have to figure out a way to phrase it that gives it a hook, that makes people want to read more about you. But I don't think that there's any one thing necessarily that's going to be better than anything else. I mean, just talking to my fellow classmates, we all have such different experiences before coming here. So if anything is evidence of it, it's us. I mean, look at the panel here. Everybody has different experiences here alone. So I don't think it's like one thing is more important than the other, but they are going to ask you about what you spend the most time talking about for sure. So if it's research, it'll be research. If it's volunteer work, it'll be volunteer work. If it's teaching, it'll be teaching, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think going to UCLA as an undergrad, there was this like kind of hidden sentiment that, oh, some orgs will get you to be like better looked at for med schools, or like some orgs won't matter as much, but that's really not true. It's really how much passion you have for it. So my application, I did do research, but it was most of my application was community service based, and I'm in the prime program now, so it kind of makes sense. So just like oriented towards that. So I think it's really important to just be passionate about what you talk about and what you write about, because I think that's mostly what they're looking for during the interview. It's like they ask you about this activity that you did and you're kind of like, oh yeah, I volunteered 8 to 12, but you don't really show like what you liked about it or what you learned from it. And I don't think it will matter as much. So again, it doesn't matter what you do, just if you enjoy doing it and how well you can talk about it.
My brother is a tenor saxophone player and he really enjoys playing jazz. And my favorite thing in the world is going to watch him play and going to his gigs weekly at a hotel back in Tucson. And I did that for like all 4 years. I was an undergrad and when my brother joined a jazz institute back home. And I put that down on my application. I did absolutely nothing. I just put that I love jazz music and I love watching my brother play. And it's become a huge part of my life and my connection with my family and my brother. And I got asked about that on like almost every single interview. And I could talk my interviewer's ear off about how much I love jazz and how much I love my brother and watching him play and what that has meant to me. Completely not medical related whatsoever, but it's a part of who I am. And I felt like it deserved a spot on my application. And so I guess that just goes to say, like, include things that you truly enjoy and that you're passionate about. And they don't have to be medical related, but just something that makes you you and makes you unique. And I'm sure that you'll get asked about it and you'll have a really fun time talking about it because, you know, you can share why you're passionate about that and why it makes you happy and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. People worry so much about your medical healthcare related experiences, but like the rest of you is just as important. Like during undergrad, my biggest focus was in ornithology. That's what I did. Nothing related to humans. It was only birds. And every interviewer asked me about my bird research, everybody, because that's such a weird thing. So everybody wanted to know. But that's a huge part. Like I've been studying birds since I was 10, just independently. So people wanted to know about it. Doesn't relate at all to medicine, but I think it helped round me out.
Yeah, I can speak for the odd MD PhD applicant out there. Research does matter. Research is basically all they will care about, kind of sadly. Our interviews are like usually 2 days long. One will usually like one day you'll spend basically just talking to PIs about research and your research and listening to their research and asking them questions. I think I got asked about the clinical stuff on my application a handful of times. Like in the entire interview season. So it is a little different. I mean, if you're applying to a focus program, for sure, I can speak for the MD PhD programs, they will care about your research, definitely know it like in and out, know what's up in the field, know what people at that university are doing something similar to you, because you might end up being interviewed by them. That's just an aside. Okay. So for our next question, what are some ways to get clinical exposure and shadowing? How do I know when I've done enough?
Ava may have alluded to this earlier, but I think UCLA, like pre-med organizations, a lot of them are quite intense. I think like some of the interviews that I've had for them are like much worse than medical school interviews. um, so I think that's like something that most people have on their radar, just all the different pre-med orgs out there that are able to provide you different clinical experience, whether that is clinical research, whether that is doing more of the social work aspect of medicine, doing more of the hospital volunteering side of medicine. And otherwise, I think you just want to have a good enough understanding of medicine so that when you are putting together your application, you're able to really pinpoint your motivation for why you want to go into medical school. So you can do that through all these experiences. Plus, you know, some people become an EMT, some people become like an MA, and all these different ways. But I think for me, I also relied a lot on, I alluded earlier, podcasts and books, and just to kind of like live through what other people who are in the medical fields are living through. I think those are also valuable ways, and YouTube videos. I think those are also valuable ways for me to kind of get a broad sense of what medicine as a field is like.
For me, I was working in a hospital immediately prior to applying for medical school. And honestly, like you're just going to have to defend sort of to yourself and then to other people that you know, like Holly said, what you're getting into and that you can sort of commit your adult career to this. And I think it comes across in general, like it's pretty apparent to people when you don't mean it, right? Like if you are saying like the standard laundry list of things for like, you know, clinical experience and research because you think that's what programs or people want, and then you pursue those things and you don't really like it, but you still do it because you have to hit the hours, and then it comes time for you to actually write about it, talk about it at length. It's you know, sort of, you know, readily apparently phony, I want to say, but like if you find a niche that you really enjoy, and you know, flesh it out and you see both the pros and cons of the day-to-day work, you understand that it's like a job just like any other job, that you face burnout and there are going to be parts that you don't like about it, but you still want to do it because the pros outweigh the cons for you. That's really genuine, and that sort of it's really worthwhile to see, right? So
I think it's really hard to get shadowing experience at UCLA. I was lucky enough to be able to do it through the Pulse program, but I think like my next option would have been to like try to cold email different physicians, maybe even at UCLA, since y'all are UCLA undergrads, and ask if you can shadow someone. It is a lot or harder or even impossible. It's even impossible for us to shadow right now. So maybe if you're applying this coming cycle or like the next coming cycle, they will be more lenient when looking at that. But agreed with what everyone else has said, that I think it really confirmed that I did want to go into medicine. So if you're able to, highly recommend getting some kind of clinical or shadowing experience. A lot of my friends were scribes, so that's another option too.
Yeah, the UCLA pre-med organizations, that's a new one for me that I've only learned about like working with you guys through Med Mentors. And it's wild to me that you have to like apply. It's like so incredible, the process that you have to go through just to get associated. But when it comes to shadowing, like shadow, it is so fun, and it should be. If it's not fun, take some time to think about that, because that is what the profession is, and you might be in a specialty that you're not interested in, and that could not be fun, but like shadowing should be fun and interesting, and you'll learn a lot from it, and you will use that knowledge when you get to school. You know, we had case-based learning our first week, and it doesn't matter if you don't know what you're talking about because you're in your first week, but you will be able to use that knowledge. So shadow if you can, and cold emailing is exactly what you should do. I did that. That's how I got all of my shadowing experiences from when I was like a teenager all the way through. I just called people or I emailed them, and then they let me come and look, because medicine is a profession of paying it forward. Like that's what we're here doing right now. All of us want to do this. All of us want to be able to talk to you. And it's not just because we're MS1s. Like everyone who is older than us also feels that way. And that's why we're doing this, because people who are older than us have done this for us before. So it's a profession of paying it forward. So take advantage of that, because people want to teach you and they're going to want to have you shadowing them, because it's fun for them too, to see how excited you get over something that has become normal for them. So reach out, use the fact that you have a hospital right here. They will want to work with you if you reach out.
Yeah, but that was something that I thought when I came to UCLA, but there's so many restrictions here that prevent students from shadowing. And like doctors typically just say that they're not allowed to because of rules. And that's why these pre-med orgs exist. Like at the end of the day, we are looking into these orgs in order to gain like shadowing experience, to know what medicine is like. And they're super competitive. So some ways to work around that. For me, I was in the lab, and through my lab we had like some underground shadowing going on. So that's one way. Another way is a cold email. That's a great idea, but not like around UCLA, because there's so many regulations at place, but around like where your hometown is from. Like reach out to the community hospitals that like during the summers or winters that you have back at home. I've had friends who did that. Those who have a car and can afford to drive a little further out, you can look into like external programs in other hospitals as well, or cold emailing those physicians in those hospitals who aren't as like bounded by these rules.
Yeah, and I know in these unprecedented times, I see doctors on social media doing like virtual shadowing opportunities. I don't know what to make of that. I've never like attended any of those virtual shadowing things, but I mean, you know, things are getting slightly better now that vaccines are being distributed, but I think it's completely reasonable to say, you know, like I was trying to keep myself and other people safe. I did not want to shadow. So telehealth was it for me, or maybe just virtual shadowing, at least for the time being. Again, for the MD PhD folks out there, I think I had like 60 hours of shadowing, so not too much, and I was okay. So again, depends kind of on what you're applying for. I know I remember at my undergrad, they told me if I didn't have at least like 300 hours of shadowing, that I wasn't going to get in. And then I thought, well, that sucks because I'm applying right now anyway. And it turned out to be okay. But yeah, good tips, everyone, good insights. So we are getting a little short of time, and as I predicted, we have a lot more to cover. So I'm going to go ahead with the next question. So there's a lot of questions about like GPA and MCAT, and you know, what do I do if my scores aren't as high as I'd like them to be? So do you guys have any advice on you know, what to do if your GPA, for example, isn't where you'd like it to be? What are some things you can do before applying to kind of raise it up a little bit?
Years of opportunity are a really great way to deal with that. The farther out you are from your undergrad experience, the less that it matters. For example, I was pretty far out from my undergrad, and only one of my letters of rec came from a professor from my undergraduate institution, because it just didn't apply to my life anymore. So if all else fails, you can always take time to beef up your application in other ways. but I also think applying strategically to a wide range of schools will also allow you to work around that. There are many different options. And a lot of institutions, your numbers are not everything about you. Like, there are many other pieces of your application. Write a strong personal statement, have people read it over, beef up your activities that you can do outside. It sounds like it's hard at UCLA. I did not know that. So maybe find opportunities outside of UCLA, see what you can do with that, do things that can detract attention away from just those numbers. They are a part of your application. They will look at them. They do matter. They are not the end all be all. They aren't. They're just not, because mine weren't even like that phenomenal, and I'm here, so they're not.
There's always an option for postdocs as well. I had a lot of friends who either did formal postdocs through a program or informal postdocs. I think that decision was mostly based on like where their current GPA was and how much they wanted to improve it. I've heard that a lot of formal postdocs, the admissions committee usually looks at that GPA and your undergrad GPA separately, but an informal postdoc kind of adds on to your current GPA. So if you want to maybe boost your GPA by like point something points, then that's a good option to do an informal postdoc. But a formal postdoc might help you get like a brand new GPA where you can show kind of like a new commitment to how you've improved. And I don't have personal experience with postdocs, but if anyone wants to reach out to me afterwards, I can connect you with a lot of friends who have and can tell you about their experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just heard from my friends who like they attend medical schools and like all over the country. They've had, C's before. Like, it's not the end of the world if you get like a C. I don't think you should retake a class unless you like fail it and you need to retake it to graduate. As long as you pass the class, it's okay. One thing I hear is that schools really like upward trends. So if the C or, the bad grade happened at the beginning, it's okay. Just, try to improve the grades like as you go on. But I don't know if anyone else has anything else they want to add. But I don't think it's necessary to like retake a class unless you've literally failed it and you need to retake it to graduate. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if this applies to anyone here because I feel like a lot of people have talked about research, but is it possible to apply without any research experience at all? Do you know anyone who has done so and gotten into a medical school?
So I've really only done like 1 year's worth of cumulative research, like scientific research. I did do a thesis in the humanities, like back in undergraduate. So I don't know if this sort of indirectly swipes at your question, but if you can sort of prove that you're able to put concerted effort into a project, have formalized thought, and defend your thought before other people, I think that counts as research. And as long as you're able to do that in some fashion, I think you're golden. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at AMSAR data, I think most schools have a very high percentage of people who have done research before coming into medical school. That being said, it's not everybody, but also that being said, like Sam talked about, the term research is so loose and it's such a broad category. Even if you had like a class project that you put in a lot of effort and time and kind of developed it, like, even a little more after you finish that class, you can put it in the work and activities and title it as research. Yeah, so, and it doesn't have to be limited to scientific research. If you're working in like a community clinic and you have some data and you like put it together and had a presentation, that's wonderful research right there. Humanities research, those are also research. So definitely don't limit yourself to just like biology lab research.
Okay. So what are some ways that I can demonstrate my leadership skills, or what were some ways that you were all able to demonstrate leadership skills in your applications?
I think a classic way is to maybe like have the leadership role, whether it's like president or coordinator, secretary, etc. But if you don't specifically have that experience, you could also demonstrate it in other activities. For example, if you did research, you could write, I don't know, like mentored other like fellow trainees or like undergrads, or if you were some kind of tutor, that's a form of a leadership as well, that you were helping others. So I think a common sentiment about medical school applications in general is that it's really how you express it. Of course, if you have like a specific title that's more specific, but you can also sway it to what you want it to be by explaining it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect answer. Just so everyone's familiar, you can technically list an activity as like a leadership activity, but like you can also have community experience, volunteering experience, and in that blurb, kind of informally talking about leadership and like teaching others or all those things. So there's many ways for you to demonstrate leadership in your personal statement and your work and activities, other than just listing an activity as leadership experience.
Okay, and then we can talk a little bit about letters of rec. So what are good ways to build relationships with mentors so that they can best advocate for you in a letter? And then if you took opportunity years, how did you maintain some of those relationships with your professors and mentors?
I think for me, I got a couple letters from professors in classes that I really truly enjoyed, and I just felt like I really loved the professors and the way that they taught and the way that they ran the class, and I just wanted to be more involved after taking the class. And so I decided to be like a teaching assistant for that particular class, and I think in all of them, all the classes I ended up getting rec letters from, I served as a teaching assistant, and that was just a way for me to kind of build that relationship with my professor and just be able to talk to them more like one-on-one and tell them about my experiences and my goals of attending medical school, and so that they kind of knew where I was heading early on. And just being able to talk to somebody like them and have them be my mentor as well was really beneficial. And so that was just one way that I kind of built those relationships with my professors.
For me, I had letters from both mentors from extracurricular orgs as well as like past professors. I think I definitely had a closer relationship with my mentors from the orgs, and I didn't really get a chance to get close to any professors at UCLA just because it was so intimidating with like so many people going to office hours, or just in general. Like I don't think I ever differentiated myself in that way. But I decided to ask professors who I had gone to office hours with, and for every single professor I asked a letter from, make sure to specify like, oh, can you write me a strong letter? And then usually they end up meeting with you. So through that meeting, they kind of asked me about me. So if they didn't know me prior, they would ask me like, oh, like, send me a copy of your personal statement and extracurriculars. And then during the meeting, I would give them more details about who I was. I think knowing that before would have made me feel a lot more relieved, because I was always super worried about never being like in a like a friend relationship with a professor, because I thought that's what you needed to get a strong letter, but I don't think that's true.
So I asked a letter from a community college professor that I like wasn't connected to, or like I wasn't in contact with for like 2 years. And then out of nowhere, I decided to just like catch up and kind of inform him because he's made like a big difference in my education. Like he taught me how to study, and like he like held office hours, and that was the first time I went to office hours and felt welcomed. And like he encouraged my curiosity and stuff like that. So I just wanted to update him. And then because he seemed very enthusiastic and supportive, and he remembered me, I thought I would just ask. And I bring this because you will be surprised how much like some people might remember you, and even if they don't, if they agree to write a letter for you, they have like no one wants to write a letter if they can write a great letter. They're going to try their best. So they're going to be rooting for you. But even if you have any like doubt about the quality of the letter, you don't have to like tell them to not write one anymore. You can just have them write one, but you don't have to send it to all the schools. So I thought you had to like all the letters that you get, you have to send to all the schools. But in actuality, some schools only want 2 letters, and like you have to choose from like the 4 or 5 letters that you have, which 2 to choose. So you can like have all these factors in your head as you're deciding which letters to send to which school.
That's actually a really good pro tip. Remember to look at the individual letters of rec requirement for every school, because you don't want to do what I did, which is accidentally send 5 letters of rec to a school that asked for 2, because like I didn't know until after I sent all my letters that the schools have different requirements. I still got into that school though, so that should indicate to you that a lot of the rules that they set are a little bit mobile. And that kind of goes into my next point, which is that when it comes to staying in touch with professors from undergrad, obviously the farther out you go, the harder it is. And it's already kind of difficult because you're in the sciences. So you're probably in a lot of lectures, at least I was in my undergrad, and I had a hard time forming relationships with my professors. We didn't have TAing opportunities like Keely did, so there really was no opportunity to get to know people. And that is one of my favorite things about my choice to take opportunity years, is that my people that I worked with saw me every day for 4 years, and they really knew me because I ran their projects for them. So they knew me. And so I think that the farther out you go, the less your undergraduate experience matters. And that is also true for letters of rec. So there's like the requirements that you're supposed to do, 1 science, 1 non-science, some others. I'm fuzzy on it now, honestly. But I did not listen to those because I didn't feel like they represented my experience. And I called my sort of top choice schools. That's another pro tip. Call the admissions offices. They will answer your questions. So I called them, asked them if it was okay, and it was. So if you're farther away and you feel like you don't have a relationship with your professors, like that's okay. Just call your top schools, make sure it's okay with them that you're going to go with mentors that you have currently rather than the ones that you had back in undergrad. And that's a way to work around it if you're worried about the time in between.
Yeah, I would agree. I sort of treated applying to medical school like applying to a job. And if a future employer looked at my resume and they saw like a hole in my resume, like I didn't choose to have a previous employer, let's say, write a letter of recommendation, if they sort of consider that reason for suspicion, then I made sure to get a letter of recommendation from that person. I just wanted to make sure that a full silhouette of who I am was represented in the application. And if there was something like, some doubt that was left unanswered, just to like explain that in the application, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, and with that, I think we are at time. The hour really does fly by. Thank you all so much to my wonderful classmates, our panelists, for taking the time out of your day to answer all these questions and share your experiences, you know, and your thoughts with us. It really means a lot. If anyone has any, you know, like last minute comments or just things they want to say, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Are our contact info given out to them, or is there a place that we can provide it?
I don't think we have like a specific place where we put panelists' contact info, but if you would like, maybe for the people in the chat, you can just type it in the chat, and then this will be uploaded, I think, on Instagram. So if you would also like your email to be put on Instagram, you can just let me know and I'll make sure that that gets included. But for the people here, you can add, if you'd like, your emails in the chat, but no pressure too.
I just wanted to say one last thing. This past year has been extremely emotionally and mentally taxing. So if you're planning to apply this cycle, or you applied last cycle, or you're going to apply next cycle, please give yourself grace and make sure to take care of yourself and really prioritize your mental and emotional well-being, because it's so important during this time. And I know it can be so stressful applying to medical school just with a normal year, but having everything on top of that, I can't even imagine. So yeah, just remember to do that and take care of yourself.
And know that the admissions officers are people too, and they've also been living through this. So if you didn't get in your shadowing, you didn't get in your research, you didn't, like, this messed everybody up. So they'll be lenient. They will. They're people. They know.
All righty, then I will go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you so much for your kind words. For sure, all of these pre-meds listening will really appreciate them.